When you think of the good old days, you probably picture full tables and second helpings without much thought. But for many working families, the reality was simpler and thinner. When wages tightened or shifts were cut, the first adjustments didn't happen in public. They happened quietly in the kitchen. Meat was sliced thinner. Leftovers were planned instead of accidental. Bread began doing more of the work. Sandwiches weren't tradition, they were strategy. Fried bologna sandwich. In many homes, bologna was as close as things came to steak. It was inexpensive, already cooked, and dependable. When you dropped a slice into a hot skillet, it would hiss and curl at the edges, the center puffing up, unless you cut a small slit to keep it flat. A tiny technique passed around kitchens because it was used so often. The smell filled the room in a way the portion itself couldn't. One slice between white bread, maybe a swipe of mustard if there was any left in the jar. Some folded the slice in half to make it feel thicker. Some added a second slice on payday weeks. It wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. It was warm, it was salty, and it felt substantial in your hand. For a lot of people, that feeling alone was enough. Lard or bacon dripping sandwich. After breakfast, the grease didn't get thrown out. It went into a tin near the stove. By the end of the week, that tin was insurance. When meat ran out, a thin layer of bacon dripping spread over bread could stand in. Sometimes there was a pinch of salt. Sometimes, for children, a light dusting of sugar. It sounds strange now, but at the time, it was simply calories. And calories meant energy for physical work. No one pretended it was ideal, but it was filling in a way plain bread wasn't. And when you worked with your hands all day, filling mattered more than elegant. Fried Spam sandwich. Spam didn't arrive in kitchens with nostalgia attached to it. It arrived because it kept. During the Great Depression and wartime rationing, that counted for a lot. Sliced and fried until the edges crisp, it developed a texture closer to ham than many people remember. Some families scored the sides so it wouldn't curl in the pan. Others paired it with whatever was available. Mustard, mayonnaise, sometimes even a fried egg on better weeks. It waited patiently in the pantry until it was needed. And in homes where uncertainty was constant, having something that waited and didn't spoil offered a quiet kind of relief. Bread and butter sandwich. Some days came down to this, bread and butter, not toasted brioche or artisan loaves, just sliced sandwich bread and a careful layer of butter, spread all the way to the corners so it looked complete. Toasting it helped, mostly because warmth makes anything feel more deliberate. Parents often cut them into triangles. Not because triangles taste better, but because neat edges can make a small portion feel intentional. When you can't increase the amount, presentation becomes its own form of care. Sugar sandwich. For children, a sugar sandwich felt like a treat. Butter first, so the sugar would stick. Then a careful sprinkle, not too much. Sugar wasn't free. If cinnamon found its way in, it felt almost festive. If someone had a bottle of vanilla and added a drop to the butter, the smell alone changed the mood of the kitchen. Adults knew it was still just bread and sugar. But sometimes, sweetness was less about nutrition and more about morale. Ketchup sandwich. There were weeks when the cupboards looked thin enough that even creativity ran out. Bread and ketchup showed up more often than people admit. The bright red spread gave the illusion of substance. To a child, the sweetness and tang made it feel like something deliberate, not improvised. People remember this one clearly, not because it tasted remarkable, but because it marked a time when groceries were calculated down to the last slice. Hardship doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like condiments standing in for dinner. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Peanut butter earned its place because it was affordable protein. A jar could last, especially if spread thin and evenly. Jelly, often homemade, preserved fruit, long past harvest, stretching summer into winter. Together they created something stable and portable. It didn't spoil easily, it held up in a lunch pail. It could be made quickly before an early shift. What later became a symbol of childhood comfort began as practicality. It was reliable, and reliability feeds more than hunger. It feeds routine. Tuna salad sandwich. A single can of tuna rarely stayed just tuna. It was extended carefully. Mayonnaise added volume. Chopped celery added crunch and distraction. Onion added bite. Some families folded in chopped, boiled eggs to stretch it further. What started as one small can became enough for several sandwiches laid out on wax paper. It appeared at church gatherings and school events because it could quietly feed many without appearing sparse. Stretching food wasn't considered clever, it was simply understood. Egg salad sandwich. When meat prices climbed, eggs stepped forward. They were accessible, especially in rural areas, and they transformed easily. Boiled, chopped, mixed with whatever was on hand, a bit of mustard, maybe some relish. They became something that felt substantial between bread. You've probably noticed something by now. None of this sounds luxurious. There's no secret ingredient, no forgotten gourmet tradition. That's because these sandwiches weren't designed to be remembered. They were designed to prevent something worse. Let me ask you something. If your paycheck were cut in half tomorrow, what would change first in your kitchen? Not your pride, not your identity, your food. That's where pressure shows up first, in thinner layers, smaller portions, careful spreading. Families didn't announce crisis, they adjusted. Week after week, they refined systems built around scarcity. And once you learn to cook that way, the habit lingers in how thin you slice, in how long you hesitate before throwing something away. Survival has a long memory. Onion sandwich. Onions were cheap and available almost year-round. Sliced thin and salted, sometimes soaked briefly in water to soften their bite. They brought sharpness when little else was available. Between bread with a swipe of mayonnaise, or even just plain, they were strong and unapologetic. Not subtle, but effective. In some regions, especially in Appalachian and industrial towns, they were simply part of the rhythm of meals. Tomato sandwich. Then summer would arrive, and for a few months, the tone shifted. A tomato, warm from the garden, sliced thick, sprinkled generously with salt, and tucked between bread with mayonnaise. That felt like abundance. The juice would soak slightly into the bread. It was messy in a way that signaled plenty. But tomatoes were seasonal. When the vines dried up, stretching resumed. Sardine and egg sandwich. Canned sardines sat on pantry shelves for weeks without complaint. Packed in oil or mustard sauce, they carried salt, fat, and protein in a small tin. Mashed with chopped egg or spread directly onto bread, they made compact, durable lunches. In boarding houses near mills and rail yards, sandwiches like these were wrapped in paper before dawn and tucked into coat pockets. Lunch breaks were short. Pay was shorter. Food had to survive hours without refrigeration and still deliver enough energy to finish the shift. Even when circumstances improved, many of these habits stayed. Grandparents who once counted slices still glance at leftovers before discarding them. They still spread things evenly, still calculate quietly. Because these sandwiches weren't nostalgia when they began. They were answers to a simple question, asked over and over. How do we make this last? And when survival is the goal, simple isn't embarrassing. It's intelligent.